In the heart of Portugal, nestled between rolling hills and ancient forests, lay the small village of São Martinho, a place where time seemed to stand still, its cobblestone streets and ivy-covered cottages holding secrets as old as the earth itself. The villagers lived quiet, uneventful lives, their days marked by the rhythmic chimes of the church bells and the distant whispers of the wind. But beneath this tranquil surface, a darkness lurked, a darkness that would soon rise to claim its due. Isabella and João were the golden couple of São Martinho. Young, beautiful, and deeply in love, they were the envy of everyone in the village. Their love story had all the makings of a fairy tale, and it seemed as though nothing could ever come between them. But love, as they were about to learn, is a double-edged sword. It began on a warm summer evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in a soft, golden glow. Isabella had prepared a special dinner for João, her heart fluttering with excitement as she waited for him to arrive. The air was thick with the scent of lavender, and the gentle hum of cicadas filled the silence. João arrived, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Isabella. They embraced, their love palpable in the warm night air. But as they sat down to eat, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. Isabella shivered, a sense of unease creeping over her. "I'll light the candles again," João said, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly. As he struck a match, the flame flickered and then flared up, casting eerie shadows on the walls. For a moment, the room seemed to be alive with movement, and Isabella caught a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye, a shadow, darker than the rest, hovering just out of sight. But when she turned to look, there was nothing there. They continued their dinner, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had settled over them. But the atmosphere had changed, and with it, so had the village. That night, as Isabella and João slept, the wind howled through the streets, and the villagers locked their doors, sensing that something evil had awakened. The next morning, they found strange symbols carved into the doors of their homes, ancient runes that no one could decipher. The village priest, Father Miguel, was called to investigate. He frowned as he examined the markings, his face pale. "These are not just symbols," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They are a curse." The villagers recoiled in fear, but Father Miguel assured them that as long as they stayed inside their homes at night, they would be safe. But for Isabella and João, safety was a distant memory. That evening, as they walked through the forest hand in hand, they came across an old, abandoned well. Curious, they peered inside, their reflections distorted in the dark, murky water. Suddenly, João's hand slipped, and he dropped the locket he had planned to give Isabella, a token of his love. It fell into the well with a soft splash. "I'll get it back," João said, but as he leaned over the edge, a cold hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing his wrist. He yelped and pulled back, but the grip was strong, dragging him closer to the edge. Isabella screamed, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to pull him back. But it was too late. With a final, desperate cry, João was pulled into the well, disappearing into the inky blackness. Isabella fell to her knees, her tears mixing with the dirt as she called out his name. But there was no answer, only the echo of her own voice. Days passed, and the village was gripped by fear. João was gone, and no one dared to go near the well. Isabella, devastated by her loss, became a shadow of her former self, her once bright eyes now dull and lifeless. But as the days turned into weeks, a strange change came over her. She began to have dreams, vivid, terrifying dreams of a woman dressed in white, her face obscured by a veil. In the dreams, the woman would whisper to her, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "He will return, but not as you knew him. Isabella would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart racing. She tried to push the dreams away, but they grew more frequent, more intense. And with them came a growing sense of dread. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered the village, the cold wind biting at her skin. She found herself at the well, the place where she had lost Joao. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the stones, and as she peered into the darkness, she heard a voice, Joao's voice. Isabella. Her heart leaped in her chest. Could it be? Was he still alive? She leaned closer, desperate to hear him again. Isabella, join me. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakable. It was Joao. Without thinking, she reached into the well, her fingers brushing against something cold and wet. She recoiled, but the pull was too strong. The well seemed to draw her in, the darkness wrapping around her like a shroud. And then she saw him. Joao stood at the bottom of the well, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his mouth twisted into a cruel smile. "Join me, Isabella," he said, his voice echoing in the darkness. Isabella's mind screamed for her to run, to get away, but her body refused to obey. She was drawn to him, her love for him overpowering her fear. She reached out, her hand trembling, and as she touched him, she felt a coldness so deep it pierced her soul. Suddenly, the ground beneath her gave way, and she fell, the darkness swallowing her whole. Her scream was cut short as the water closed over her head, and she was plunged into a world of shadows. The villagers found her the next morning, lying by the well, her eyes wide open in terror, her body cold and lifeless. But the strangest thing was her face. It was frozen in a smile. Father Miguel performed the rites, but the curse had taken root. That night, as the villagers slept, the wind howled once more, and the symbols reappeared on their doors, more menacing than before. And from the well, a soft voice could be heard, whispering in the darkness, "Join me."